Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
Okay. Good afternoon, councillors, staff, and residents who are attending here and at home. I'd like to call the Emergency and Community Services Committee meeting for October 19th to order. Please switch all electronic devices to a non-audible function. I should do that myself before. Please note that quorum is now present. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda today?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have a couple of changes to the agenda under communications items. Item 5.1, correspondence from Acorn Hamilton respecting proposed amendments to the renovation license and relocation listing bylaw, with a recommendation that it be received and referred to item 10.1, addressing renovations, tenant displacement, and property standards in apartment buildings in the City of Hamilton, the subsections that were deferred in the August meeting. And similarly, we have items 5.2, Karen Andrews, Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario, respecting a legal opinion on the Hamilton apartment rental program, with the same recommendation that it be received and referred to item 10.1.
Thank you very much, Clerk. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Nan. Any comments on the agenda or questions? Seeing none, let's have that vote, please. That vote carried unanimously 6-0. Are there any declarations of interest this afternoon? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Pardon me, I see Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Councillor Maureen Wilson. I missed you.
Thank you. My eScribe button is not responding. Apologies. Just declaring a non-disqualifying issue interest with respect to, I could toggle, I believe it's 9.2. As it identifies the Hamilton Community Foundation. My husband is the president and CEO of the Hamilton Community Foundation. It's a non-disqualifying interest, and perhaps I may have to declare the same for 10.7, but it will depend on the answers to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And for those who are present, when someone declares a non-disqualifying interest, they can continue to participate in the meeting impartially in the decision-making process related to that matter. Any further declarations today? Seeing none, thank you. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, September 21st, 2023. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the previous meeting? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Nan. Any comments or discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll call that vote. Yes, please. Thank you. And that vote carried unanimously 6-0. We're now moving on to communications. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the communications as presented. Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Nan. So we have correspondence from Acorn Hamilton respecting proposed amendments to the renovation license and relocation listing bylaw. And we have item 2 from Karen Andrews, Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario, respecting a legal opinion on the Hamilton apartment rental program. And we'll call that vote now, please. Councillor Alex Wilson. Sorry.
We're just referring it to later, so can make a comment now or later. I just want to echo one of the things we just heard from the rally outside and receiving these correspondence. I think something we've been told before, we've seen before, and we see today is that tenants are being bold, and I'm borrowing the words from Reem of the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic out here. Tenants are being bold every day in telling us their stories about what's happening, in sharing the realities on the ground, and potentially facing persecution and response to their very access to housing as a result of letting us know what's going on. And tenants are asking us to be bold in our response to this crisis as well, in the same ways that they've shown courage. And so just want to, I think those are really powerful words outside today, and wanted to bring those in as we receive these pieces of correspondence that ask us to be bold.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for sharing that with us. Any further comments or questions with regards to the correspondence? Councillor Cameron Kretsch.
Thank you. I'm sorry to be there in person today, but I'm under the weather and don't want to spread my illness. Yeah, since we are talking about this now, I just thought maybe I would also just, I think there's an important part at the end here of this long correspondence, 15 pages, most of it talking about a legal opinion, but to what Councillor Oxelson was specifically saying, I'll read from it. It says, but sometimes you just have to have the fight. You might have to make the other side account. You might have to send a message to the province or to the community that an injustice has been identified and that something must be done. Or it might be the case that it would simply be wrong to stand by and allow flagrant breaches of the law to pass without lifting a litigation finger in reply. There is precedent for success, and people are urging us to try. So I think it's important for that message to be out there. We have all kinds of decisions to make here about risks and challenges and legal opinions, but residents are facing this every day. So thank you.
Well said, Councillor. Thank you very much. Any further comments? Now we'll call the question, Madam Clerk. Thank you. And that vote carried unanimously again. Consent items, number 1, resignation from the Seniors Advisory Committee. This is item 9.1. Are there any questions regarding the item? Seeing none, I need a motion to receive the item. Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Wang. We'll have that vote. The vote is up. We're on consent items, Councillor. And that vote carried unanimously. The second consent item is ending of Hamilton Community Foundation Green Shield funding for dental services. Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Wang, please.
I appreciate that we got notice of this, but in terms of how are we continuing on with any of these programs, or are we just completely shutting down any of these programs? Through you, Chair, just a little question to staff, please.
Thank you.
Chris Erstek, Acting General Manager of Community Services. We do have Bonnie Elder, Director of Ontario Works, and our author of the report online to answer the question.
Bonnie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Thank you. Bonnie Elder, I'm the Director of Ontario Works. So to answer through to the councillor, there are existing emergency services for dental, which are covered within the Ontario Works program for social assistance recipients and low income. It is an emergency level service. The other piece of the services related to public health, I would also say that Pat Armstrong from Public Health is available today, can answer that side of the services that continue. Also within the report, we are hopeful that a new federal dental plan that is in the works right now will be up and operating and provide a little bit more extensive dental coverage for individuals who have a low income in our community.
Councillor.
So how much of this existing, the programs that are shutting down is moving over to the Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program? And then how much of this existing program being shut down is ultimately going to be under the federal purview should it come forward? So I just wanted to get that, I guess, breakdown as to where things are going to get picked up from. Through you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Elder.
Through to you, Councillor. So I don't have that level of detail. I could ask, I'm not aware if Pat Armstrong may have that level of detail from the public health lens. She is on the call today as well. So I would look to her. If not, if she doesn't have that level of detail, we can certainly get back to you with that.
Pat, are you on the line?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, through you, Chair. We don't have the level of detail that for the breakdown, but the current proposal for the federal program is all people by 2025 would be covered if they make less than $90,000 annually.
Thank you for
But
that. Councillor.
more detail than that has not been shared.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor?
I think that there was just one line here on page 2, and it's the last point. In the last paragraph point, it says, as a result of the introduction of the Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program, there was a need to reconsider the use of supplemental denture coverage funds to low-income seniors. So that was that kind of line where I was just like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, how much of it is there already a need? I'm just mindful that we have a lot of seniors that do need dentures, and dentures are expensive. So that's just, perhaps I will leave that as the comment, Chair, because I understand that we don't have those numbers today. So I'll do a little more investigation work on my own and hope to report back at some point to this committee. Thank you.
That's much appreciated, Councillor. Any further questions about ending of Hamilton Community Foundation Green Shield funding for dental services? Seeing none, I need a motion to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. And we'll call that vote up.
The vote is open.
Councillor Jackson is in the affirmative. And that vote carried unanimously 7-0. We're now moving on to our discussion items. Addressing renovictions, tenant displacement, and property standards in apartment buildings in the City of Hamilton. This is PED 23072, citywide. We're dealing with subsections E, F, G, and H, which were the sections that were referred from our August 17th meeting. So we're really being tasked with approving those subsections. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Nan, please.
Through you, Chair, I don't have questions on the report at this time as it's the same report that we received back in August. I have notified my committee colleagues that I do want to propose further direction in light of the written correspondences that we've just received from ACORN as well as ACTO. And at the appropriate time, I also don't want to cut off other committee members. If they have questions pertaining to the report, I'm just letting you know as chair, I'm prepared to move that motion with a seconder at the time that you deem appropriate.
Okay, so why don't we test with councillors around the table? Are there any councillors that have any questions or comments on the report that is before us? Seeing none, I recognize Councillor Nan.
Thank you. And I believe clerk has the language.
Clerk Kolar, if you could put it up on the big screen. There we go.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, it's moved by myself and seconded by my chairmate, Councillor Alex Wilson. And so technically speaking, that the subsections E, F, G, and H of Report PED 23072, respecting addressing renovictions, tenant displacement, and property standards in apartment buildings in the City of Hamilton, PED 23072, citywide, be deferred to the meeting of the Emergency and Community Services Committee no later than January 18th, 2024 meeting to allow for the following. A, that staff be directed to review the correspondences received from ACORN and ACTO today regarding possible amendments and revisions to the proposed renovictions license and relocation listing bylaw, as well as the proposed revisions made by ACORN to the bylaw, and report back to the Emergency Community Services Committee no later than January 18th, 2024, on any staff recommended revisions to the proposed renovation license and relocation listing bylaw. And B, that staff be directed to include the employee and other costs as placeholders in the 2024 operating budget deliberations. The staff and other costs outlined in subsection H of Report PED 23027 as a council referred item in the 2024 budget, such that the additional investments can still be approved as part of the 2024 operating budget should council approve the renovation license and relocation listing bylaw. And through you, Chair, it's a very specific list of recommendations here that work with the existing report that we've received from staff, but it enables staff the time that they need to go through the very itemized recommendations that we've heard and received from both ACTO as well as ACORN, and give staff the adequate time to actually respond to those and put forward not only potential revisions to the recommendations, oh my God, R-letter words today, but do so in a way that committee and council can feel that the final suite of this bylaw is the term of council priorities, which is to preserve affordable housing in our city. All the colleagues here at ECS, as well as council proper, or in a more fulsome way, also identified that we have a target this term of council of reducing the number of Hamiltonians facing homelessness by 30%. This committee has brought back this work to staff in order to feel confident that the bylaw that we're going to enact is something that we are prepared to defend. Not only from a legal perspective, but prepared to defend against the pressures that our tenant neighbors are facing day in and day out. As Ward 3 councillor, and I know that my council colleagues across the city, we're all experiencing the same thing, which is more and more of our renting neighbors are experiencing eviction in the current market. And just recently, we heard from the federal government in approving $93.4 million through the Housing Accelerator Fund that this city is capable of developing gold standards when it comes to housing solutions. I want a gold standard when it comes to our renovictions bylaw. It's the least we can do in terms of the experiences that our residents are going through on day in and day out. Councillor Wilson talked about it as courage. I characterize it as an incredible stamina, incredible resilience, and incredible collective effort to say what is true and what is honest as hardworking Hamiltonians who are very capable of not only maintaining a dignified home, but enhancing the homes that they rent, as well as contributing to our community in such a way that it is not just about their individual needs being met in this moment in time through a robust renovictions bylaw, anti-renovictions bylaw. It is putting in place bylaws that we can build into making sure that future renters' rights are protected. We know this market is shifting, and it's continuing to shift in trends that are absolutely predictable. Over 2,000 Hamiltonians are homeless. Known to us, 280 individuals are living encamped. In the city of Toronto, over 30% of unique individuals using shelters for the first time are there because they've been evicted out of their apartments. We know where this story is headed, and we have a duty and obligation as a municipality to curb that trend. We have the possibility with this term of council to do what we can to preserve the affordable housing that is here and to preserve the rights of our renting population. And so that is the primary motivator for this once and for all deferral in order to get back a robust policy that everybody can be proud of here in Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, the motion to defer is a debatable motion, so are there any questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Wang, please.
On the deferral, no, but I hope that during that time that we can also ask our teams to really explore what is the necessary municipal resourcing staff, because at this point, this report still stands at essentially 25 FTEs for all of this entire suite to be enacted. So I hope that we can also be a little more strategic and innovative and maybe look at it from a minimum case perspective as opposed to the Cadillac version of 25 FTEs. So I hope that that will also be put in consideration, but not on the actual deferral itself. I'm just hoping that the additional poke is just to look at it as a resourcing level, whether this is absolutely needed, especially if we're looking at a 2024 budget that's going to be a pretty massive one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. My apologies, I missed Councillor Alex Wilson. Councillor Wilson, please.
No apologies needed. Thank you so much. Really excited to second this motion through you, Chair. I think tenants have been doing the work, and to be fair, so have our city staff. I think when I think about all the changes we've done, and again, I think the words shared outside are just so powerful and really accurately describing what's going on. And I think one of the lines I've heard repeatedly, not just at the rally today from ACORN members, but over the past number of years is, we know the province doesn't care. So we're focusing on a level of government, and we're focusing in a place where action can happen. And I think there can be times when our community is asking us to do better, that we hear that as a criticism or as an attack that we haven't done a good enough. And I think really it's important, at least I think this is being presented in such a way, and I'm hearing this in such a way, that there are 3 levels of government. One of them has walked away and is actively making this problem worse. How does that change what our responsibility at this level of government is? Do we just look at the same kind of system we had before? Or do we have to take on maybe a bolder, a newer approach, given the reality that the partner who should be the most at the table is the least present? And that's really sickening, frankly, because it's people's lives that we're talking about here. I've shared it before around this chamber, and I think it's just worthwhile to share again that in my lifetime, 26 years, rents have tripled. In the past 10 years, they've doubled. That trend keeps getting faster and faster and faster. At the same time, we've declared a housing emergency. Our focus is about more than just supply in our housing policy. We understand supply is important, but it's also about keeping tenants in their homes today. This is the most cost-effective way to keep tenants in their homes today. To not be paying the prices of the various costs of cleaning up encampments, the enforcement of our encampments policies, stopping this problem at the source, stopping this upstream is absolutely where we need to be focusing our attention. And I think that's what many of us around this chamber ran on when it came to housing issues. And so these are the types of outstream solutions that we need to do. We need to listen to tenants, and I think that's what this deferral does, is it allows us to continue incorporating that feedback. And so what's the feedback that we're hearing? There's 3 pieces I just want to draw some attention to, because I think these are important invitations to strengthen our drafted bylaw. One of them has to do with data collection, ensuring that as we look at multiple different systems, our safe apartments building bylaw, our renovictions bylaw, we're making sure that we're getting as much data as we can to protect tenants, to ensure their ability to access their right of first refusal, right of reentry, right of first refusal. In those situations, there is a data gap that's been identified by some ACORN members, and I think solving that gap would be one way to strengthen this bylaw. There's been some comments about the fee schedule, and I think that's another opportunity where we could really seriously reflect on the feedback that we're hearing and think about within the guidelines of how administrative penalties work, have we gone as far as we can go? Is there some language here? And then I think most notably and most substantially, when a tenant is displaced for work that we have now deemed to be legitimate, that does require displacement. We've done that extra work. We are in this system of ours. how do we ensure that that tenant has a place to go when we know there are no places to go in our community? When right now we are saying that our shelter systems are overrun, we have no places for folks to go. How are we protecting that? And so I think there's been, some very, very compelling arguments that maybe we can go a little bit further. Maybe we need to think about this as a chance to be bold. I think certainly we know the legal environment is unpredictable. Whenever you're doing something new, you never know how it's going to end up. But I think there's a variety of suggestions that have been brought forward. And I think doing the work of evaluating those, listening to those, and honoring the contributions we keep hearing is so, so vital. So I think I'm really excited about the timeline as well. January is not changing the report timeline is my understanding. We're still moving forward in principle with a lot of this. We're just ensuring that the feedback we've heard can be incorporated as we move forward. So I just want to close by saying thank you to all of the tenants in our city, all of the ACORN members who keep raising their voices. You deserve 3 levels of government that care. You deserve 3 levels of government willing to take action. The gauntlet's been put on our feet to step up today. I think it's responsible that we meet that challenge. But I think it's also important that once we meet that challenge, we keep looking for other levels of government to step up, because we could have rent control in the province next week. Like, that would have a huge impact. We are trying to solve a crisis that we are not creating. And so that's a challenge, but it's one that it's our job to meet, and we've been asked to. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Cameron Kretsch, please.
Thanks, and first, want to thank every renter who has been leading this fight. It is the folks who are on the front lines, folks who are renting across the city who've been leading this work, who've been putting together these arguments, and have been pushing for many years for these kinds of changes. So I just want to thank everybody who's been doing that work, because without them, we wouldn't be here. I also really want to emphasize a few things. I think I really appreciate the way that Councillor Nan framed this as the gold standard. This isn't about perfection, and I want to say that right from the gates. This is not about getting the perfect bylaw, it's getting about the right bylaw. There's a big difference between those two things. A perfect bylaw would address all the conditions that have us put in this awful position in the first place. No such bylaw will ever exist. But we can get as far as we can get in Ontario, and we can push this and be a leader in the province, which I think we need to be when it comes to this. And I want to speak to specifically why I think this is an issue that more of us should have our focus on. I often say things, I talk about how many renters exist and live in Ward 2 who pay taxes here, 76% of the folks who live in Ward 2. But this is a bigger picture issue for the city. I don't think we're always really well aware of that. In Wards 1 to 5 alone, according to 2016 data, so we're talking about data that's not even that up to date, almost 100,000 people rent. And across the city, that's 32% of all folks' rents. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are impacted by these policies. This is not a concern that's held for a few, it's a concern held for many. And until we step up and lead here, until we start putting protections in to ensure that when someone's rent evicted, they have the assurance that the city has their back, renters will continue to suffer, they will continue to show up here, and they'll continue to speak to us. I welcome them to. And so I support this delay, as Councillor Nan says, a hopeful final delay so we can get a policy that we can all support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Wang, if you don't mind taking the chair for a second, please. So the deferral motion is most certainly in order. The rationale is very sound. We want to get the best bylaw that we possibly can, and we've received additional advice that can be incorporated by our staff. So I want to thank the councillor for doing this. I recall a few years back when the provincial government made the decision to eliminate rent control. And I recall saying at the time, the government is taking advice from developers and people who are commodifying rental properties, and that this would be a huge crisis in no time. And I hate being right, but that one, you could see it coming. We all saw it coming. Everyone around this table saw it coming. I'm proud of the councillors around this table, specifically on this committee. Councillor Nan, Councillor Wilson, you have been unrelenting in your desire to bring in a renovation bylaw that is a made in Hamilton solution that would really help residents deal with this issue. They are being bullied. There's no other word for it. I mean, to have someone come in and say, okay, I'm evicting you, you've got this amount of time to get out. Why are you evicting? Well, I'm going to renovate the building. And then all of the tactics start. And it is heartbreaking, and Councillor Nan is 100% correct. It's not just in one ward in the city. It's right across the city. We've all heard from residents who have experienced it. It is shocking the way folks are dealing with tenants. It reminds me of the time when Dickens wrote his stories. That's the kind of abuse that folks are now dealing with. So I'm grateful for Councillor Nan taking this direction. I'm grateful to our staff because you've done a yeoman's job, and I sincerely mean that. And you know I don't give faint flattery. But you have listened to the concerns of the residents. You've listened to the discussions and debates and conversations that we've had with councillors, and you have worked hard at turning that discussion into a bylaw that really would help protect tenants in this city. I look forward to the day when it finally gets approved, sincerely. I'm hoping it's an omen of good things to come, although omen is probably a bad word, but you know what I mean, right? And so we will be dealing with it in January. The one thing I would ask staff is to just clarify when you come back, when I'm looking at all of these FTEs, and Councillor Wying is correct, you know, do we need a Cadillac version, or can we get this up and running and then hire additional staff as is needed, depending on the volume? Similarly, I noticed that we're talking about a new solicitor for legal services. I'm hopeful that we're not going to need a solicitor to be totally specialized in this area and nothing else. In my mind, I'm aware that if that office is not busy, that solicitor can also pick up work from other legal files that are within the city. And the reason I point that out is a number of these are exactly the same. You know, if once we get this underway and we find that landlords are now taking us seriously, we may not need as much time on this file, but those staff could also be utilized on other files with their expertise. So we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. But I fully support where we're headed. And again, I want to thank the councillors for leading this charge. I'll take the chair back now. Thank you. Are there any further comments from anyone? Seeing none, then we'll have the vote on the deferral, please.
That vote is open.
Thank you. That vote carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're now moving on to item 10.2, which is Large Volume Hazard Storage Database and Program, HSC 23068, citywide. Are there any questions on the report? Chief Dave Cunliffe is present to answer any of our queries. Councillor Wang, please.
Do we have to have large hazard storage of things that blow up? Chair.
Chief?
Dave Cunliffe, Fire Chief, through the chair to the councillor. So the Ontario Fire Code allows for large volumes of hazardous material to be stored on site in various industrial, commercial, or agricultural properties in order that they can do the process or manufacturing, or in terms of agriculture, they can use it for their crops. What the concern is, councillor, quite frankly, is we believe that there may be buildings, commercial, industrial, and agriculture that may not be adhering to the rules of the Ontario Fire Code, first and foremost. Second of all, there are a number of buildings used for those processing, almost 2,400 that we estimate based on our analysis, that we don't necessarily know what's in them. So this is about us as a fire service being able to start to collect data, to be able to have a better understanding of what product is located where, which would then allow us to do a better job in terms of both emergency response and also maintaining fire code restriction.
Councillor?
I appreciate Chief so much, because when I was reading this, I was just like, why are we keeping these things? But I failed to think ahead and say that this is because industrial, agricultural, there are other uses for this. So I appreciate Chief's answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions? So Vice Chair Wang, if you can take the chair. So Chief, you know, I've had concerns about this for a long time in terms of our fire department knowing what's going on, so that when they show up at a fire, we can be prepared. I can recall a number of fires where they showed up and within minutes, there's a significant explosion because no one told them what was on site. I remember the Waxman fire down on Centennial Parkway, and it was bad. Are we aware, or through this process, because there isn't always a delineation. You may have industry across the street, and across the road you've got houses that have been there a long time. And the concern that I would have is that these companies having large storage of materials that could become explosive given the right conditions are directly across from residential properties. So during this process, will we be able to identify and put in place or require emergency plans to be put in place for those companies to help to buffer and protect the neighborhood?
So through the chair to the councillor, it's a really great question, councillor. So just a little bit of context, you're absolutely right. Across this city, we have got industrial and commercial areas that are intertwined with residential. In fact, part of us doing our community risk assessment, which I'll be bringing forward early in 2024, we're seeing, in fact, in wards 3 and 4, where 1/3 of the landmass within those wards are industrial based, and they're absolutely intertwined with residential. So the concern is shared by us as well. It's our belief that through this process in developing this database, a couple things will happen. One is we'll know where they are. It will help us to understand, based on our inspection of these properties, that the materials are being stored properly relative to the requirements of the Ontario Fire Code. So the proper fire safety systems and the proper fire safety plans are in place relative to that. But the big piece for us is that we have an understanding of it, that we can then provide that information to our responding incident commanders through our internal systems, so that when we get there, if there's things that we need to do relative to evacuation, things that we need to do relative to the tactics that we take to deal with those incidents, we know that going in, rather than, as you say, finding out minutes or hours after we've already been there. So I don't think there's ever a system that, you know, is foolproof, but this certainly will give us the opportunity to have a lot more information, a lot more knowledge, and to be able to do more pre-planning from our perspective relative to the emergency response.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. So can I ask, when you are doing those inspections, and if you uncover I'll be hypothetical. There are some metals, as you know, if water hits the metal, it's a big bang real fast and very powerful. Will we be able to order companies who may be storing some of those things? For example, no, you don't need sprinklers when you've got those metals sitting underneath that sprinkler. You need a different fire suppression system. Is that the type of thing that will organically occur from this process?
So through the counselor to the chairman, or through the counselor, or the chair to the counselor, sorry. Yes, so what will happen is when we go in and we actually find out what's in these buildings, the inspectors will take a look at what's required under the code. And the code based on use and the type of storage that's happening will point to the types of fire safety systems that are required, if required. And based on that, that will give us the ability through the Ontario Fire Code to put orders against the business owner if they're not in place to make sure that things are done in a safe and appropriate manner.
Yeah, if you ever want to see the worst case scenario, look up the videos with regards to the ammonia nitrate explosion in Lebanon. And people think, well, it's down by the harbor, not a big deal. But if you have a large volume of materials that can explode, the explosion can damage and go very, very far, as we saw in Lebanon. So I fully support this. I'm hoping that it makes our city safer. And the need is there to ensure that our first responders are aware what they're walking into. And that has been my prevalent concern for quite some time, because you show up at a fire and you don't know what you're walking into, and you're asking the responsible party, and he says, I'm just a security guard. And now you're fighting a fire and you don't even know what's in the warehouse. So those are things that have always kept me awake at night. So I'm glad you're doing this, and I fully support it. I'll take the chair back. Seeing no further questions on this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Nan.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, also want to thank the Chief for bringing forward the report and recommendations. To my colleagues, I was just made aware earlier this morning about some proposed changes by the province in terms of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And one of the proposed changes by the MECP is that they will no longer need to provide any upfront assessment of potential impacts of certain types of operations that require currently stricter permissions, and those include hazardous waste, liquid waste, large volumes of waste. So encouraged that we will be able to do what we can, which is fundamentally get the information into a database that is available for the fire services, but I think it's also really important information for the public. So through you, the question I have related to the recommendations is that database going to be available in any form should residents inquire about the safety of their neighborhoods?
Chief, please.
Through the chair to the councillor. So one of the things that we have to be mindful of, councillor, is that there's information that would be included in the database that is sensitive to the security and safety of the public. So we would have to get some legal advice in terms of what we could or couldn't. The initial was, no, this was an internal database for the fire service. And that was one of the things that when we talked to legal about it, that was why they strongly suggested it being a database, so that we would be able to maintain that security.
Okay. Appreciate it. Chair, in terms of the changes or proposed changes to MECP, it's my understanding that municipalities also have the opportunity to provide comment by the end of this month. So I will be bringing forward a motion to council regarding this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I did speak with staff, and they're in the process of reading that and trying to understand the implications, and they will be prepared to report back to us. So, and that one just shocked me. Anyways, no further questions or comments. So we'll call the question, please, clerk.
May I have a mover and seconder, please? If I missed that, I apologize.
Councillor Wang and Councillor Nan.
Vote is open.
Thank you.
Vote is closed.
And that vote carried unanimously, 7 votes. We are now moving on to the next item, which is the Hamilton Fire Department agreement with Wounded Warriors Canada. Again, are there any questions on the report? And the chief is here to handle any of those questions. Councillor Wang.
This is very timely, and I think that it is absolutely necessary because when we're speaking about mental health. Chief, is there anything else that you might need to help with the signing of this or the additional new program that will eventually come out of this? Is there anything else that we should wrap with this so then that way it's a fulsome support for our firefighters? Through you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief.
Through the chair to the councillor, thank you for that. At this point, what I would tell you is this program and the affiliation with Wounded Warriors Canada is going to give us a much larger stable of access to mental health care professionals. And that's really what we're looking for. We, again, because this organization is well entrusted relative to first responders and certainly military, they have a very good understanding of what first responders go through. We have identified them as one of the core groups around that can actually support. So what I would say to you at this point, we feel very confident and comfortable with the support networks now that Wounded Warriors potentially will be part of that around us, but we are always keeping our eyes open because one of the things that we want to make sure we do is that it's appropriate service relative to our folks and what they go through and what their needs are. And we're also doing it lockstep with the city in terms of return to work services and employee wellness so that we are doing it in a way that it's complementing the existing process. So thank you, but at this point I think we have got things well at hand.
Councillor?
Chair, I'm just mindful that we sent out a statement of that we are in a state of emergency for mental health was one of those 3 that we had identified early on this year. So I'm particularly, I don't know if impressed is the right word, but happy to see that our fire department is taking these steps to address mental health within the firefighting profession. Thank you so much.
Agreed. Any further questions or comments? I need a mover and a seconder to place it on the floor for approval. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. And we'll have that vote, please.
Vote is open.
That vote carried again unanimously by a vote of 7. Emergency Food Strategic Planning Committee funding request HSC 23072 citywide. Are there any questions on this report? We have staff present to answer any of those questions. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. Fully supportive. And I think, you know, as a committee, I anticipate that we'll be saying yes today based on past comments on this matter, receiving the delegation. Don't want to speak for anyone, but I think that's where we're going. I do have a question for staff about the instructions. Nothing major. Just yesterday, we heard from our Office of Climate Change Initiatives that one of the gaps in our climate action strategy has to do with our agricultural partners, particularly our rural land users as well. This is a substantial investment in procurement of food resources for this specific year. We don't have the wiggle room to do anything differently. This is an emergency request. But through you, Chair, wondering if staff could comment on whether it makes sense to potentially amend recommendation B to include the Office of Climate Change Initiatives, not looking again for their intensive feedback for this specific referral in the 2024 budget, but more so getting some opportunities about if this is an annualized request, what opportunities exist to making sure this funding flows to as many partners as possible while meeting this need.
Thank you. Chris?
Through the chair, Chris Hurstick, Acting General Manager, Community Services. Absolutely would take that direction. Fabulous idea. Would be more than willing to investigate that further with the Office of Climate Change.
So do you want to make an amendment so that it becomes item C?
Either adding a C, or if it makes sense to just add to B, healthy and safe communities and the Office of Climate Change, and whatever procedurally, I'll maybe defer to you, Chair, the clerks, whether it's a C or just an added sentence in B, but that's my intention, and would welcome a seconder.
Clerk Kolar, any suggestions?
That, through the chair, that would be a C, an additional. I'm just going to bring it up onto the screen.
Thank you. And while the clerk is doing that, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Wang? That the annual funding request by the Emergency Food Strategic Planning Committee be referred to the General Manager, and then C.
If the good councillor would be so kind as to repeat what he wanted.
We could probably copy and paste B word for word and then just replace General Manager of Community Services with Office of Climate Change Initiatives, OCCI.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson, did you wish to speak to the amendment or to the overall motion?
The main recommendation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the amendment is before us. Any further comments or questions on that? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on the amendment, please.
That vote is open.
Thank you.
Councillor Maureen Wilson, through the chair, are you still with us? We're just in the midst of a vote. Thank you.
That vote carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillor Tom Jackson on the main motion as amended.
Thanks, Chair Clark. And just to say, expressing my respectful disappointment that we're going to, the 24 some odd agencies in the community are going to have to wait on pins and needles to see in 4, 5, 6 months if a portion, some, all, maybe none of the $1.25 million will survive the 24 tax operating budget. So through you to Acting General Manager Chris Hurstick, we heard loud and clear the need is immediate, and it's not imminent, it's immediate. And so I'm trying to understand why some other form of funding option to meet the immediate need that the representatives had come in a month ago, representing the, I think most, if not all, the 24 some odd agencies that are in the food bank business to helping the growing need in the community. So maybe a comment and explanation from the Acting General Manager through you, Chair Clark, please.
Acting GM Hurstick, please.
Through the chair, after the delegation at ECS committee, staff met with the corporate finance group for recommendations for the report and providing funding. Their recommendation was to refer this to the 2024 budget process for 2 reasons. One reason is that we potentially would be getting maybe more additional asks for funding from other client groups. And instead of doing a one-off funding for these groups, a comprehensive budget funding strategy would be able to be developed for all referred items.
Councillor Jackson, please.
Thanks, Acting General Manager Hurstick. I thought that the delegates in their presentation, I thought it was pretty well comprehensive citywide in terms of the representation they brought forward with concurrence from the other agencies. So I'm in a bit of a quandary now because obviously I don't want to lose a chance at this funding opportunity through the 24 budget, which of course I will support the 1.25 million wholeheartedly at that time. But the need is great at this time and getting worse. And we heard the delegates' plea. We heard from the outgoing executive director in May, Joanna Santucci of Food Share. At that time, she had never seen it as worse or as bad in our society and our community and this economy as she has, as she's departing. And so I'm just in a quandary. Philosophically, I should be supporting this, but my heart is very disappointed that we're not even providing some upfront monies from even some form of a reserve fund at this time. Thanks, Chair Clark.
Thank you, Councillor. So if I'm looking at page 93 of 223, at the bottom of the page, it shows $625,000 to purchase food by Hamilton Food Share, $625,000 to staffing and infrastructure expenses at partner food bank agencies. So do we have reserves that we could utilize to provide the food? Because the food is going to be the big issue between now and the end of the year.
Through the chair, if I understand the question correctly, do we have reserves to provide the funding?
$625,000 for the food.
Through the chair, I believe we do. I can report back if that is feasible.
So it's with this committee. There is another option, whether you deal with it now or you deal with it at council when everyone is here, that you may choose to continue with the referral for the 2024 tax-supported operating budget, but it's not unusual for this committee or this council to provide emergency funding for situations like this. Councillor Jackson?
Chair Clark, I would ask that just 2 more weeks, then do we have a meeting in 2 weeks or has it just been canceled? Did I just see an email that said it was canceled?
That is correct.
That's unfortunate. So I'm just looking to my colleagues as well. Send it, all right, let's send this off to council, maybe with instructions. If staff in the next 7 days, Chair Clark, can look at some form of reserve funding to cover off what you have rightly suggested for at least the $625,000 of purchasing food for this immediate need.
Thank you.
That, I'll put that as some form of amendment, Elsie Kolar, if you could capture that, please.
So Acting GM Herstick, is that a fair compromise here, that you'll look at this and be prepared to address it at council?
Through the chair, absolutely. Provide that direction and we'll have a response back at council on next Wednesday.
Thank you. Clerk Kolar, do you need any assistance with language?
No, just the microphone. No, I have that captured. Thank you.
Thank you. So it would be a friendly amendment, or do you wish to make it a formalized amendment, Councillor? Formalize it, please.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Jackson, Councillor Nan, Councillor Alex Wilson. Okay, Councillor Alex Wilson, thank you. Thank you. So in essence, we're asking staff to be prepared to speak to an emergency grant of $625,000 for Hamilton Food Share. Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you. Would Acting GM Herstick be able to also provide any information that he may have or that may be eminent of other emergency asks that have either come before this committee or come before or may be coming for this committee? Sometimes he has knowledge of these things before we do. Thank you.
It's a good question.
Through the chair, we have not heard anecdotally of anyone coming forward. We just have a request for meetings in the future with some community agencies, and we anticipate that's what the requests are going to be for funding.
Councillor Wilson, please.
I see on that last bit, just making sure I heard those meetings that have not yet been organized, they'll be before the 2024 budget is finalized?
Through the chair, that is correct. We've recommended that all funding requests to the City of Hamilton and Council be prior to December of this year.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. So if I could ask Chair for Elsie Kohler to read the proposed amendment back for me, please.
Absolutely.
Through the chair, I have drafted to prepare an emergency grant of $625K for emergency food services, and I've put a note to myself in time for council, which will be next week.
Councillor Wilson? It's specific, just to clarify, it's specific to Hamilton Food Share?
Yes, I'm just mindful. I don't know full declaration. I don't know the community agencies that GM Herstick has referred to. I am mindful that there could be multiple agencies that are facing some sort of emergency that are equally in dire straits. So I'm wondering if there would be an opportunity, if I could ask through you, Chair, to GM Herstick, what this might mean for those future asks. And perhaps that will have to be debated at council, but would there be any reserves available outside of the expenditure of this amount of money? Thank you, for emergency purposes.
Thank you. GM Herstick, please.
Through the chair, I believe that question would be better asked at council. The finance staff would be present. I just don't have the access to the reserve funding.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'll have to ask then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Wilson?
Thank you. Just a question through you, Chair. Understanding what we might get back, I'll say it as a statement, maybe. I think that's the clear way to do it. I would also be okay if in receiving a report back, there was a recommendation that said, here's where we would find $625, because that's the motion text as it reads. But my understanding is that's an annualized amount. We're hoping to get the budget passed within 3 months. So if for whatever reason there's a reserve that's sitting at a quarter of that amount, here's a quarter we could do immediately, and we could refer the 75% to the budget. I'm supportive of the motion as it's written today. I just wanted to kind of maybe say that when the report comes back, if there's alternatives for consideration based on the reserves we have, because not knowing what those reserves are, not knowing what their amounts are, if we can get 40% of the way there, I would still appreciate that recommendation. So I'll just maybe say it like that as opposed to a question, because I think I know that that could be possible, and it's dependent on doing the work that we haven't done yet.
GM Herstick?
Through the chair, we can take that direction.
Thank you. And I think it's equally important, Hamilton Food Share has been able to take government dollars and morph them into many, many more dollars. So that may happen, we don't know, but perhaps we could reach out to Hamilton Food Share also. Councillor Tom Jackson, back to you, sir.
Yeah, Chair Clark, I just want to reiterate, as is on the front page of this recommendation, on September 21, members of the Emergency Food Strategic Planning Committee Hamilton came and made a representation. And I seem to recall, because I appreciate some of the comments that others may come forward, and that's fine, but I thought this was an umbrella group that was pretty well representing most, if not all, of the food bank agencies in our community, and hence their title. The Emergency Food Strategic Planning Committee of Hamilton made a presentation to ECS back on September 21st. So for me, that $625,000, at least for purchasing food, would be distributed amongst member agencies if approved. I just want to clarify that. Thanks, Chair Clark.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, so we need to vote on the amendment first.
So we have so this is a further amendment then?
Yes.
Thank That vote is open.
Thank you. Thank you. That vote carried 7-0. And now on the main motion as amended, please. Same mover and seconder. This goes to council next. Council has to ratify it. That vote carried 7-0. Thank you very much, councillors. The next item on our agenda is the Early Years Community Plan 2023 update, HSC 23063 citywide. Are there any questions regarding the report? Staff are on hand to answer your questions. I'm seeing no indications, so I need a motion to approve the recommendations within the report. Moved by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Seconded by Councillor Narendranan, please. And we'll call that vote, please, Clerk Kolar.
That vote is open.
Thank you. That vote carried 7-0. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to the next item, which is 2023 Ministry of Long-Term Care Funding Enhancement, HSC 23057A, Ward 7 and Ward 13. Are there any questions on the report? Michelle Baird and Brian Krepp are here to handle the questions. Councillor Tom Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Clark. Again, excellent news for our two long-term care facilities. Some additional funding from the Ministry of LTC. Just a question through you two. I see the author of the report, Senior Administrator Odiarty, on your CPART recommendation. Holly, who are the allied health professionals funding? Is that a new group? Is that a group that's been around a while? I don't recall ever seeing that mentioned in a funding source before. So why don't you update me, please? Through you, Chair Clark.
Thank you, Councillor. Holly, please.
Through the Chair, Holly O'Doherty, Senior Administrator, Long-Term Care Division. The Allied Health funding was new funding that began in 2021. That pot of money was alongside for the nursing funding, being RN, RPN, and PSW, and they come as two separate pots of money, and it's very specific as to how you can spend it.
And so thank you, Holly, for educating me. And so supplementary, I see you're talking about if there's a balance of 33,000, that group or our operating surplus will absorb that funding to keep the positions moving forward in perpetuity. Through you, Chair Clark.
Thank you. Holly, please.
Through the Chair, that's accurate.
Thank you. I'm very supportive. Thanks, Chair Clark.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Jackson, if you'd like to move the motion to approve the recommendations. Thank you. Councillor Wang will second it.
Vote is open.
Thank you. And that vote carried unanimously. We are now moving on to item 10.7, which is the service manager consent for Corktown Cooperative Homes Development of 221 and 223 Charlton Avenue, HSC 23056 in Ward 2. Are there any questions regarding this report? Councillor Cameron Kretsch, please.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I don't have questions, but I thought we had to get the recommendations on the floor. My apologies.
I'm just following my roadmap. Councillor Maureen Wilson, do you have questions? Thank you.
Oh, happy to move it when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Through the chair to the staff who are present, if I could just ask for clarification on the funding source that the applicant or party has for the additional properties, please and thank you.
Thank you. Brian, please.
Through the chair, Brian Krebs, Manager for Social Housing. So the funding for the project involves a number of different components, including grant funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, a loan from the Co-op Federation, Ontario Provincial Housing Initiative funding, and Canada Mortgage and Housing. The funding source that is not mentioned in the report is the Hamilton Community Foundation provided the original mortgage for 221 and 223 Charlton.
Yeah, thank you. As a consequence, I'll just declare a non-disqualifying interest. Thanks for that confirmation publicly.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions on the report? Seeing none, Councillor Kretsch, you wanted to move this motion. And who wishes to second it? Councillor Alex Wilson. And we'll call that vote, please, seeing as there's no further speakers. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kretsch, you wanted to speak to it? My apologies, sir.
Just very briefly, I just wanted to speak to the fact that in case it's not really clear to everybody in the room, this is more cooperative housing in Hamilton. So what happened is over a long period of time, this 35-year-old organization at the Co-op homes in Corktown, which is right near Corktown Park, has one building and then purchased other properties and is now building more units of cooperative housing. So I'm just really grateful that this has finally come to fruition. I know the folks somewhere in the room are, it's been a long time coming. And so gratefully just want to say grateful to the previous councillor in Ward 2 who supported this pretty vociferously, got it to this point, and how here we are in this term of Ward 2, and I'm also supporting this. So just thankful for that continued support for co-op housing in Ward 2, and thanks to those folks who have been working really hard on this at the co-op for many years.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, now we'll call the vote, please.
That vote is open.
Thank you, Clerk. And that vote carried 7-0. We're now moving on to end of mortgage strategy and implementation, HSC 23050. Are there any questions regarding the report? Councillor Maureen Wilson, please.
Thank you. I would appreciate an overview from staff. I think it's an important report. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Baird, please.
Through the chair, Michelle Baird, Director of Housing Services Division. So the report before you details the proposed end of mortgage strategy. This is something that we've talked about on a number of occasions with this particular group. And this speaks to the fact that, as you know, many of the social housing projects in the city have either come to the end of mortgage or end of agreement or will in the coming few years. So this particular report before you aims to save, if you will, those units. We have up to 10,678 affordable and deeply affordable units that are touched basically by this project. So the work before you is basically a strategy and an implementation plan on the work that we would do within the city to ensure that those units, wherever possible, will remain as affordable units. So this basically outlines the strategy for you on how we're going to work with those providers when they come to end of mortgage. And if there are other questions, Councillor, happy to go into those.
Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you. I may have some questions, but I'll hand over the floor for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to get clarity around the social housing transition reserve. So if I could just get an overview of what that reserve is and then how it fits into the model that's being recommended here.
Brian, please.
Through the chair. So the social housing transition reserve was a reserve that was created when social housing was downloaded from the province back in 2001. There was some funding that was made available by the province at that time. Almost all of that funding has now been spent, but the reserve still exists. So what we are suggesting is that we would simply use that reserve as a vehicle to capture any unspent funding within year so that it could be carried forward.
Thank you. And just to clarify, so currently the reserve is a zero line item reserve that can be reutilized, or are we using it right now to do some of this work already?
Brian?
So through the chair, right now I believe the balance is under $100,000. So it's really not serving the purpose that we're proposing here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Just asked and answered.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Wilson, did you have additional questions? Thank you. Councillor Wang, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just so that I'm clear, when these end of mortgages come due, these housing providers are still under the purview of our service manager because they continue to have geared to income or affordable rents inside of their housing portfolio. So is there an opportunity for us to look at additional incentives like construction, because I know that the cost of building is going to be higher, and since that those mortgages are coming due, they, as we all know, they have no incentive to continue working with us. So what's that? How many of these are coming due in the next little bit? So I'm struggling because I think I haven't formulated all of my questions yet, but they're in my, I think the first fundamental one is how many are actually coming due in the next year?
Fair question. Brian?
So through the chair, so we have 128 projects in multi-unit projects in total, and 20% of them, I believe, have come due either previously or will by the end of this year. There's a chart that provides the entire 10-year span until they have all come due. To your point about opportunities to expand stock, not just preserve it, I would suggest that the arrangement, the report that committee just approved with Corktown is an example of how to leverage that existing stock, those existing providers. Corktown's a great co-op community. They wanted to expand to serve more households. By working with us, not only will we be preserving their existing number of units, but they will be expanding by 17, 5 of which will be deeply affordable.
Councillor, follow up?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of thoughts going through my head right now, and I think I will have to take this offline. Thank you very much.
That's fair. Any further questions from anyone else around the table? Seeing none, I can't recall. Did I have a mover and a seconder?
We do require mover and seconder.
Require one. Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson, please. Thank you. And we'll call that vote up now. And that vote carried 7-0. The next item is very controversial. We need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Cameron Kretsch. I hope you feel much better. Seconded by Councillor Jackson. If anyone is opposed, they can stay here by themselves.
The vote is open.
But staff are leaving. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Excellent meeting.
That carried 7-0. Thank you, everyone, for your time.